Ever heard of a serial killer so prolific, their sentence is measured in centuries? Yeah, we're going there today. We're diving deep into the life and crimes of Luis Garavito, the Beast of Colombia.
It's a heavy one.
You provided the Wikipedia article, and it's, well, buckle up. It's rough. We're talking about Colombia in the 1990s, a nation already grappling with, intense civil unrest. And then you have this predator stalking basically the most vulnerable members of society, children.
A scenario that really makes you wonder, how does someone operate with such, impunity for so long? What factors, what combination of things allowed this kind of darkness to grow?
And that's what we're here to try and unpack today. I have to warn you, this is a deep dive into some seriously dark stuff, the heart of human depravity.
Let's start with what we know about his early life. The Wikipedia article paints a picture of a childhood just completely marred by abuse and neglect.
Okay.
We're talking poverty, a physically abusive father, and even the possibility of sexual molestation.
It's almost like, I don't know, it's a cliche at this point in true crime, right? The troubled childhood that leads to a life of violence. But is it really that straightforward?
Well, it's rarely simple, but we do know that trauma in early childhood can have a huge impact on brain development, especially in areas that control emotional regulation and empathy.
So are you saying Garavito was destined to go down this path because of his childhood?
It's never that predetermined, But in Garavito's case, there are some disturbing details that add to the overall picture. The article mentions this fascination he had with figures like Hitler and Campo Elias Delgado, the guy who committed the Bogota restaurant massacre. Almost like he was drawn to these examples of just extreme violence.
It's like he was studying them or something, trying to understand the darkest parts of humanity. But here's something I found really unsettling. Garavito sought psychiatric treatment when he was young for depression and suicidal thoughts.
That's a crucial detail, I think. It suggests he was already struggling with something, with this darkness inside him that he just couldn't control.
Which makes his descent into this horrific world of violence even more, disturbing. It's like we're catching glimpses of a monster slowly being created.
Yeah. What's really chilling, though, is that even at that early stage, there were these warning signs, signs that were missed or ignored. It makes you wonder, could some kind of intervention have changed his path?
That's got to haunt the people who knew him back then. But for now, let's move on to his crimes themselves. How did Garavito manage to lure so many victims into this, web of terror?
That's where the real depths of his depravity become clear. We see this very calculated manipulation designed to exploit the innocence and vulnerability of children.
The Wikipedia article, it really breaks down Garavito's MO, and it's terrifying how effective it was. He had this whole blueprint for preying on innocent kids.
You're right. His approach was chillingly systematic. He went after boys, mostly, between 6 and 16 years old.
Okay.
A lot of them were street kids, or from really poor backgrounds. Kids who were, less likely to be missed if they disappeared, I guess.
So he was choosing victims who were already kind of invisible to society.
Exactly. He exploited those inequalities, understanding that these kids were often overlooked and they didn't have the same support systems that might have protected them.
Right.
And then there's the methods themselves. The article mentions he used all these different disguises, like a priest, a teacher, even an old man, figures that kids are, taught to trust.
It's so insidious using those expectations to, completely disarm his victims.
Yeah, he really understood the power of those archetypes, the inherent trust they evoked.
It's like he was studying the weaknesses in our social fabric or something, finding the cracks where evil could just slip in.
That's a good way to put it. And once he had their trust, he would lure them away with these promises, work, candy, small gifts, simple things that would appeal to a child.
It's awful to think about. These kids already facing hardship, being drawn in by someone offering a moment of kindness.
It really shows a deep, understanding of human psychology, how to exploit those basic needs and vulnerabilities. But what happens next is even more disturbing. He would lead these kids to isolated areas like ravines, wooded areas, even places that later became mass graves.
It's chilling just picturing those walks, the kids slowly realizing they're being led further and further away from safety.
And here's where Garavito's cruelty gets even more sinister. The article talks about him talking to the children, encouraging them to talk about their lives, their hopes, their dreams, Almost like he was, I don't know, trying to create a connection with them
before destroying everything. It's like he wanted to savor their innocence, their vulnerability,
Right.
before unleashing this darkness inside him.
The level of premeditation is just, it's mind-blowing. He wasn't just driven by some basic urge, there was this calculated cruelty to it all, this desire to inflict not just pain, but also psychological torture.
And the details of the crimes, the Wikipedia article mentions beatings, stabbings, even burning. It's hard to even read about it.
What's particularly disturbing is this use of a screwdriver in a lot of the attacks. It suggests this very personal kind of brutality, a desire to cause pain in a very slow and deliberate way.
Did he ever explain why? Was there any attempt to understand what drove him to do such horrific things?
Garavito claimed that there was this force inside him that made him do it. He talked about this feeling of rage and power when he was hurting people.
Right.
It's similar to what we hear from other serial killers, this detachment from humanity, this inability to see their victims as people.
It's like looking into an abyss, trying to understand something that's just completely incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And what makes it even more unsettling is how he documented his crimes. Like, in detail, journals, tallies of his victims, even pictures. Like, he wanted to remember every single thing.
Yeah, that's a common trait among serial killers, this need to relive their crimes, to hold on to that feeling of power and control. It suggests a very, very disturbed mind, this fascination with their own darkness.
So how did it end? How did the authorities finally catch this seemingly unstoppable monster?
For years, Garavito was like a ghost. He just vanished after every crime, even though the body count kept rising and the panic was growing.
It must have felt like they were chasing a phantom, like something out of a nightmare.
Absolutely. But even phantoms leave clues, And as the investigation went on, they started to see patterns. The victims, the way he operated, the locations, it all pointed to one person, this horrifyingly organized predator.
So they were getting closer, like building a profile, piecing together the puzzle.
They were, but what finally brought Garavito down was a combination of, I guess you could say, luck and one incredibly brave young boy.
I'm intrigued. What happened?
Picture this. A 12-year-old boy manages to escape from Garavito right as the worst is about to happen. He's beaten up, terrified, but he runs for help.
That's incredible bravery, facing down that kind of terror to save himself and maybe countless others.
It is. And that act of defiance, that's what starts everything moving. The police catch Garavito, although he tries to get away with a fake ID, but they're already suspicious.
They had a feeling, based on everything they knew, that he was the one. But how did they prove it? How did they definitely link him to all these crimes?
You remember that suitcase Garavito left with his girlfriend? The one with all the disturbing stuff in it?
Yeah, the pictures, the journals, the list of victims, like a trophy collection of his darkest deeds.
Well, that suitcase also had other things. Clothes, receipts, even a pair of glasses. And as the police went through all the evidence from the crime scenes, they started to notice something really chilling.
They found matches, things that connected Garavito directly to the murders.
Exactly. It was like a trail leading right back to him. But the real clincher, the undeniable proof, came from the forensic lab. They had been working on a DNA profile from evidence on the victims.
And it matched Garavito's.
Exactly. The science was undeniable. When they confronted him with all of this, Garavito finally broke. He confessed, led them to a bunch of grave sites, and described his crimes in horrific detail.
It's almost too much to grasp. The scale of it all, the depravity, over 140 confirmed murders. It's mind-boggling.
It's a dark reminder of the evil that humans are capable of, something that's hard to even fathom. But even in the face of this horror, there's a sliver of hope. Catching Luis Garavito ended his reign of terror and brought some semblance of justice to the families who lost so much.
A bittersweet victory, I guess. A moment of closure in a story filled with just unimaginable pain. But what was the public reaction to all of this? How did Colombian society deal with the fact that these monstrous acts happened right in their midst?
That's a complicated question. There was relief, of course, that the nightmare was over, but also this huge sense of shock and outrage. How could someone do these things for so long, right under everyone's noses?
And what happened to Garavito? After he confessed, what was his fate?
Well, that's where the story takes another turn. Garavito was sentenced to 1,853 years, the maximum under Colombian law at the time. But because of some legal technicalities and his cooperation, they reduced it to 22 years.
22 years for over 140 murders. That doesn't seem sufficient, to say the least.
It doesn't. And there's a lot of public anger about it. Many people felt that justice hadn't been served, that the punishment didn't come close to the magnitude of his crimes. It sparked this whole debate about the legal system, the idea of justice, and the need for change.
It's a debate that's still going on, a reminder that even when you're facing pure evil, achieving justice is rarely simple.
That's true. And it's something every listener will have to think about for themselves. What does true justice look like in a case like this? What does it mean for a society to heal from such deep wounds?
Those are heavy questions, questions that stay with you long after the news stories are gone. And it brings us back to the heart of this whole deep dive, the question we've been asking from the start. What can we learn from Luis Garavito? What lessons can we take from this journey into the darkest parts of humanity?
That's a question that requires careful thought, and it's something we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
I don't know about you, but after spending all this time on this deep dive, like really digging into the horrors of what Garavito did, it's left me feeling a little shaken, to be honest.
I get it. It's completely normal to feel disturbed, when you confront that kind of darkness. The Garavito case, it forces us to look at some pretty uncomfortable truths about what humans are capable of. The potential for evil is, well, it's kind of everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, can we ever really prevent something like this? Can we protect ourselves from these monsters hiding in the shadows?
That's the big question, right? And there's no simple answer, no easy fix. But I do think that Garavito's case, it offers some valuable lessons, some clues maybe that can help us navigate this, this difficult and complicated territory.
I'm listening. What kind of insights can we take away from this whole journey into the heart of darkness?
Well, I think the biggest thing is understanding the root causes of violence. The Wikipedia article, it talks about the systemic issues that contributed to Garavito's crimes, things like poverty, inequality, and the lack of support for vulnerable kids.
So it's not just about catching the monsters after they've done something terrible, but about addressing the conditions that create them in the first place.
Exactly. We need to shift our thinking from reacting to preventing. And that means putting resources into social programs, building stronger support systems for kids who are at risk, and creating a society where every child feels safe and valued and protected.
It's a huge task, but it feels like the only way to truly stop this cycle of violence, to create a world where these monsters like Garavito don't have a chance to hurt innocent people.
It's a battle worth fighting. And it's a battle that everyone needs to be a part of. Individuals, communities, institutions, everyone.
It's about creating this safety net, I guess, this web of protection that catches those who might fall through the cracks. But I keep thinking about the victims. How do we even begin to help them heal from the pain and trauma they've gone through?
That's where the focus has to be on support and healing. We need to give them the resources they need, counseling, anything to help them process what happened and rebuild their lives.
And what about justice? We talked about Garavito's sentence, the public anger, the whole debate about him possibly getting out early. How do we make sure justice is truly served in cases like this, that the punishment really fits the crime?
It's a tough question. It's about finding a balance, between punishment and rehabilitation, holding people responsible for what they've done, but also recognizing that people can change.
And it's about listening to the victims and their families, making sure they're heard and their needs are met.
Absolutely. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoring balance, healing, a sense of order.
Reading that Wikipedia article, I was struck by the stories of the victims who survived. Their resilience, their strength, in the face of such unimaginable horror, it's really inspiring.
It is. It shows how powerful the human spirit can be, the ability to overcome even the darkest experiences and come out stronger.
Like William Trujillo. He was only 9 when Garavito took him. He was held captive for 12 hours before he managed to escape. And now he spends his life helping other victims of abuse.
That's a perfect example of turning pain into something positive, using your own experience to make a difference in the world.
It reminds us that even in the face of all this darkness, there's still hope. There's light. There are people and organizations out there fighting every day to stop evil, to protect those who are vulnerable, to build a world that's more just and compassionate.
And that's a message we need to keep spreading. The fight against evil, it never really ends, but it's a fight we can win if we work together.
Well said. And thank you for guiding us through this. It was a difficult topic, but So important to talk about.
It was my pleasure. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here with us on this journey. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about why people do the things they do, the better we can create a world where tragedies like this don't happen anymore.
And if there's just one thing I hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this. Don't ever lose hope. Never stop fighting for a better future, a world where every child can grow up safe, loved, and free from the shadow of monsters like Luis Garavito.